Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Thank you so much for coming to the third show of Toler. For everyone who is here to see a show, thank you so much. For everyone who is not, give me 15 minutes and we'll be out of your hair. And I'm sorry to interrupt your studying. These pieces are about mental health. Each of the 5 days is separated into a category, and today's is mental health. We're speaking about anxiety and depression from my experience as a Muslim in America. After the show ends, hanging below the poster over there, you can see a QR code that says Monday Mental Health. Scan that for resources directly related to what I'll be talking about today. Just a little super short background. The first piece I'll be doing is called Do You Know What It's Like? I originally wrote this piece and had no intention to ever include it. I was in a really, really dark place. I was really depressed when I wrote this. I wrote it for catharsis and almost like just get these thoughts out of my head and onto paper. And I shared it with someone, and he said, "Oh, absolutely include this. Are you kidding?" These are very, very personal stories, some from very darker moments. But I'll explain the second piece when I get to the second piece. But for now, do you know what it's like? Do you know what it's like to be Muslim? Do you know what it's like to love life, to look forward to the afterlife? Do you know what it's like to live a life of peace? Do you know what it's like to know you're doing the right thing? Do you know what it's like to have your friends always stand by you? Do you know what it's like to have your community embrace you no matter where you go? Do you know what it's like to know you're doing the right thing and to know and believe that you can speak to God and know He always hears you? To believe that that is exactly what you are supposed to do. Do you know what it's like to know that through God you have the most powerful friend you could possibly imagine? Do you know what it's like to want to help those in need, to sacrifice for those you love? Do you know what it's like to prefer negotiation over bloodshed in times of war? Do you know what it's like to be both unique and the same as billions of others? Do you know what it's like to share the same ancient stories as half the planet? Do you know what it's like to have your faith beautifully blend into your daily life? To be driven, to be kind and caring to all? Do you know what it's like to strive to be your very best self? Do you know what it's like to enjoy happiness, to hate anger? Do you know what it's like? Do you know what it's like to be made to feel less than because of the way you pray? To be othered for your faith? Do you know what it's like to see your peaceful way of living weaponized? Do you know what it's like to be made into a public enemy, to fear for your mother's life every day? Do you know what it's like to never know when right-wing white supremacists will decide to kill you? To know the country you were born in, have lived in, and will probably die in hates you? Do you know what it's like to know that half your friends think you're going to hell? Do you know what it's like to be othered? Do you know what it's like to be terrified of airports, not the passengers, but security? Do you know what it's like to be told you're acting white anytime you do anything remotely considered good? To be told effectively your culture is unintelligent and dull? Do you know what it's like to have a group of teenagers pull up alongside you, mimic gunshots and explosions, then tear off? Do you know what it's like to be slandered and defamed on a national scale? Do you know what it's like to go through all this just to wonder if you can even complain? Do you know what it's like to have all this build up over your entire life? Do you know what it's like to feel hopeless, to watch as your love for life fades away against your will? Do you know what it's like to feel the world is so beyond changing that nothing is worth it? Do you know what it's like to be Muslim? Do you? I wrote this one actually, I think 2 years ago today. In it I'll reference my nephew's birth, and getting to meet him. I went back this weekend for fall break to celebrate his second birthday. So the week, I'll refer to that week a lot frequently through this piece. That week was last week, 2 years ago. Anxiety sucks. And brown folks, we're not exactly known for our positive views on mental health. So when I would have thoughts like, you know, we haven't talked in a few days, so he must be mad at me, it became really hard for me to understand that no, he's not. I would have thoughts like, you know, she's been avoiding my texts. She clearly doesn't want to be my friend anymore. Yes, she does. But the thoughts would continue anyway. We had an argument, and they never want to see me ever again. Yes, he does. Well, we made up, but she's still mad. She has to still be mad. No, she's not. They cancel plans at the last second. They're clearly avoiding me. I know they're not. I do. But repetition of a lie can make it true. Talking, it can help sometimes, but when everyone around you is saying, oh, it's okay, you're over-exaggerating, you're being dramatic, that's not what this is, blah, 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 blah. It becomes really hard to think of anything else, but then all I hear in my head is, no, you're right, he hates you. She wants nothing to do with you. Your friends don't actually ever want to hang out with you. Your family thinks you're a disappointment. You're a failure. You're failing at everything you're doing in life, blah, blah, blah. Over and over and over again. It becomes really, really hard to figure out what's true and what's not, even when it should be so obvious. It's not. My sophomore fall here at Wake, I was dealing with plummeting mental health, if it's not obvious. 18 plus credit hours, some 40 hours a week spent in this building in rehearsals, another 10 a week spent across campus in the Muslim Students Lounge trying to build up the Muslim Students Association. There was so much, it was so overwhelming. I remember I would spend so many hours with the Muslim students that I felt like I was driving a wedge between me and my sweetness just up that hill. I wasn't. But I was spending so many hours in rehearsals that I felt like I was losing all the connections I'd made with the Muslim students. I wasn't. I thought I was. And that same semester, I watched my suite go from, I can't imagine living with anyone else, to I don't want to live with you anymore. That same semester, I felt like I drove a good friend away. And then I made a dozen new friends. That same semester, my sister gave birth to her fourth child and first son. That same semester, all this happened before midterms. It was rough. And that same semester was the first time I ever found myself crying while reciting Quran. I've always been religious. I have always been, for as long as I can remember, but I've only ever heard the stories, seen the videos of people hearing Quran recited and breaking into tears, sobbing. I was always like, that's not real. That doesn't happen. Like, people, how do you get to that point? You can't. Like, I genuinely did not understand, and I still don't understand how someone can get to that point. But that same semester, as I sat sitting in the Muslim Students Lounge one night, a night at the end of a week where I had spent every waking moment with those closest to me. A night at the end of a week where, despite that, I had never felt so emotionally depleted and drained and alone. Maybe I was going to get with another bout of depression. And everything started to feel detached and distant, and life was starting to feel dull and colorless. But as I sat there, after finishing my nightly prayers, I looked up and basically thinking, I might as well, I've tried everything else. I said, Ya Allah, I need help. And I walked through my week. I said everything out loud, in detail, as though he did not know. My voice broke. I don't think until that moment I had realized how hard I was taking that week, that semester. But then I said all of it out loud, uninterrupted, alone. It was only then, as I turned to my God, and I asked for help. I asked why, I asked how, I asked what I was even asking for, and I just prayed that I began to feel everything. All the emotions that I had kept suppressed all week, I could feel building and reaching explosive magnitudes, and they just kept going and going and going and going, and I kept talking until I couldn't think of anything else to say, and then I recited a verse from the Quran that I know. You alone we worship, and you alone we ask for help. So I recited the rest of the chapter. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. All praise belongs to God, the Lord of all worlds. Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim, the most gracious, the most merciful. Maliki Yawmiddin, master of the day of judgment. إِيَّاكَ نَعْبُدُ وَإِيَّاكَ نَسْتَعِينُ. You alone we worship, and you alone we ask for help. اهْدِنَا الصِّرَاطِ الْمُسْتَقِيمِ. Guide us along the straight path. صِرَاطِ الَّذِينَ أَنْعَمْتَ عَلَيْهِمْ. The path of those who you have guided. غَيْرِ الْمَغْضُوبِ عَلَيْهِمْ وَلَا الضَّالِّينَ. Not the path of those who have earned your anger or those who have gone astray. And as I ended with a single word, I wept. I could hardly breathe, but I couldn't stop. But for the first time in weeks, I felt like I could exist. I could just exist. I didn't have lines to learn. I didn't have events to plan, no tests to study for, no homework to do, no relationships to mend, no friendships to start. Nothing. Just simple and pure existence. You know, a sense of calm overtook me. The intrusive thoughts slowed, and you know, I think I genuinely laughed for the first time in a month. I've always been religious. And I say I've always known that God runs towards those who even look towards Him, but that same semester, my body physically reacted to me saying God's words through the Quran, and for me, in that moment, the Word of God was enough for me. Please, for the love of God, quite literally do not leave here thinking I'm saying religion cures anxiety, because it does not. Please don't think that. Because I was also actively in therapy my sophomore fall. I was actively doing everything I possibly could to rein in my mental health socially. And it was my faith that was that final hand pulling me back from that metaphorical ledge. My belief in God, my Islam, saved me from going to a terribly dark place my sophomore year. And that experience, it permanently changed the way I recite the phrase God is the greatest, because truly, Allahu Akbar